But if you look into Islamic history, so one of the people I'm going to mention a few times, and I really hope he doesn't mind, is Habib Kandi. I'm sure you've heard of him before, right? So he's written multiple books, but three of them in particular that I'm aware of are about intimacy in marriage. And he talks a lot in depth about the very rich Islamic history in getting it right in the bedroom, basically.
Tell us a bit about that. Because there'll be viewers who are like, what's she on about? What's she talking about?
Yeah. So like erotology in Islam is not a new thing. This is like considered one of the sacred sciences, right? This is halal. We're talking about, where there's marriage in place and everything. This is like absolutely undisputed ibadah from start to finish, due to its intention. And something that Allah has decreed for us all to enjoy, and that is the way it's supposed to be, right? But I think I'm not entirely sure, and other people will be able to either correct me on this or they will be able to, compliment me on being accurate on this. I believe that with colonization, for example, of the world, what came with that was a prudish nature around intimacy in marriage and things like that. Because we can't negate the fact that, these countries that colonized, I know this is not about colonization, it's not. But the reason I'm mentioning this is, these colonized cultures, so to speak, would have permeated societies to an extent and set some new boundaries or new etiquettes that they felt were appropriate. Excuse me. And it kind of negated the fact that it became new cultures in Muslim society that, it wasn't acceptable for women to have these conversations or men to have these conversations. This was strictly private again. And, we weren't supposed to talk about it. But if you look into Islamic history, so one of the people I'm going to mention a few times, and I really hope he doesn't mind, is Habib Kandi. I'm sure you've heard of him before, right? So he's written multiple books, but three of them in particular that I'm aware of are about intimacy in marriage. And he talks a lot in depth about the very rich Islamic history in getting it right in the bedroom, basically. And he's got all the advice, and he's got, from a spiritual perspective and intellectual perspective, he is absolutely brilliant. And that's where a lot of my reading has stemmed from, to be quite honest with you, in relation to that. I was surprised to hear that in Muslim history, even as early as the fourth caliph, there were village aunties of the day in Medina who knew exactly what to tell their own sons what to do, for example, when they got married. And they knew exactly what to tell the daughters to expect. And with absolutely, unabashedly so type of thing, it was, I'm giving you this because you need this information. You're supposed to enjoy it. It wasn't an uncomfortable conversation for them. It was, Allah's decided that you're allowed this. You're getting married. This is a great thing. Here you are. Here's all the information you need. And if you need anything else after, then, it was an always open dialogue.
Wow.
We seem to have suffered a severe disconnect to that, to the point where I think I mentioned this to you before, when I've had conversations with ladies from some heritage communities and some non-heritage communities, mainly heritage communities, if I'm being completely honest, though, is that literally until the night of the Mendi, they just get sexual innuendos and they actually have no sex education before that point. And I'm like, that's an absolute travesty type of thing, because while I don't agree with the agenda that's being pushed in schools, sex education is very important to Muslims, isn't it? I'm sure you'll agree with me. And so the reason why I'm mentioning that is because they would then go on to say, so you either have an understanding husband who will hear you out, or you don't. And that's the end of that conversation type of thing.
And he probably didn't get any sex education in that sense either. I mean, he probably learned a lot of stuff, but not necessarily what he would need to know and understand in order to make that night, a pleasurable and kind of, comfortable night for him and his new wife. So yeah, it's a bit like the almost blind leading the blind, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you don't just get miraculous revelation about this kind of thing, literally, as all individual human beings. It's especially as marriages, grow in length of time, it's about, growing with your spouse, isn't it? And making sure that you're still interested for them and they're still interested for you, and not just, you know, physically intimately, but emotionally and intellectually intimately as well. Like somebody said to me, what's one of the most important things you consider with your own husband, type of thing? And I was like, the ability to intellectually dance is like right up there. I mean, I'm married to another convert. We had some very frank conversations before we got married. And we did have a conversation about intimacy and like our expectations, you know, in a modest fashion, you know, with chaperones around and things like that. It was really important to us that we're on the same page as two converts who have been married before, because it's not a joke, and it's not something you easily kind of want to leave. You definitely don't want to leave.
No, you can't. No, the reality is that you can't. The reason I'm laughing, sorry guys, I'm not being puerile. I'm just thinking, I'm sure that you and your intended knew exactly why you were having the conversation and knew what your boundaries were. But I'm sure any chaperones just were wishing that the ground would open up and swallow them if they could hear you.
I'm sure they were probably like, let's just look at that really interesting lampshade over there for a moment while.
Yeah.
While this conversation's happening.